So we're just gonna start from these problems, and we're just gonna go all the way to game theory. The only chapter we're not gonna be covering is pricing strategy because there's not any practice material up for it. So with that being said, let's get started. Alrighty. And do you guys see my screen?
Yeah, we see it.
Yeah, we can do it.
Okay. All right, let's get started. Wait, let me make sure I'm recording. Okay, yeah, we're recording. Okay. Parker owns a car wash. She currently has 4 employees and is able to wash 18 cars per day. If she hires a 5th employee, she'll be able to wash 21 cars per day. Car washes cost $10 each. What is the marginal revenue product of the 5th employee? Okay, so with this, we're gonna go to Microsoft so I can write down some definitions. We'll get to this later. Okay. Let's start what marginal revenue product is. Marginal revenue product is the additional money you gain by hiring an additional employee. This isn't the exact definition, like you're not going to find these exact words when you look in the book, but it's effectively what it is. And how do we get this? The equation for this would be marginal product of labor times price of item. And you may be wondering what marginal product of labor is. Marginal product of labor is the additional product produced by hiring an additional worker. So it's basically the extra stuff that's made when you hire another person. And so let's go back to our problem and let's sort of quantify and look at these numbers. So first and foremost, when we had 4 employees, we had 18 cars that were washed. When we hired a 5th employee, we washed 21 cars. So our marginal product of labor in this case would be a 3 because we went from 21 to 8. Well, we went from 18 to 21. So obviously that's an addition of 3. Echo, would you upload the recording and send it to me? Sure.
I thought it was she has 18 if she has 4 people, and if she has 5, she has 21, right?
Oh, did I say that?
Did
I say that?
yeah, well, you said 4, you said 21, not 18.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, sorry. I'm a little tired. But yeah, so at 4 employees, she washes 18 cars. If she has 5 employees, she washes 21 cars. So that's an addition of 3 cars. And so let's write that down on like our little board. So in this case, MPL would equal 3 because we had an addition of 3. And the price is just given to us. We can see it fairly easily. The price of each car wash is $10, as we see right here. And so our price would be $10. And so price equals 10. Is there any questions about how I got these 2 numbers so far? Okay. And whoever asked the question about the, recording being uploaded, yes, I will send it to you. And so if marginal revenue product is MPL times price, then let's plug these 2 numbers in. 3 times 10 equals 30. And that's also our answer. And so in this case, the answer would actually be C. So it's 1C. Does anyone have any questions about how I got that? Okay, I'll also explain why the other answers are not correct. So A, $3. This is not correct because I believe you can get this number by having each car wash cost $1 instead of $10. So obviously that's not the case. Obviously that's not the case because each car wash costs $10 rather than $1. So A, it's not correct. B, 21 cars washed. This is not our marginal revenue product. This is our total product. And what that is basically the total amount of an item we've produced. or total amount of a service we gave. And obviously that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at the marginal revenue product. C is the correct answer, and D, 3 cars washed. That's our marginal labor product. And that's basically the additional product we were able to produce by hiring an additional worker. But that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at marginal revenue product, which is the extra money we got from hiring an extra worker. So is there any questions about number 1? Okay. Oh, someone want to say something? Okay. 2. Jose owns a business that repairs car windshields. And sorry. Jose owns a business that repairs car windshields. The price to repair a windshield is $50, and the equilibrium wage for employees is $100 per day. According to the table below and the rational rule for employers, how many workers should Jose hire? Well, let's write down what the rational rule for employers is. So the rational rule for employers states, and this is not like the exact definition. Rule for employers states that you should hire 1 more employee if the marginal benefit you receive from them is greater than the marginal cost of hiring them. Well, let's what is marginal benefit, marginal cost in a hiring sense? Well, marginal benefit is basically your marginal revenue product. It's the additional money you get from hiring them. So it's better to quantify that later because it might get a little confusing with all these definitions. Oh, are you guys hearing with that beeping noise? Because I'm getting like notifications from my computer. Okay. Marginal cost is basically the wage you pay them. That's what marginal cost is. Is there any questions about those definitions so far? Okay, so let's go back and look at well, our problems. So imagine we go from 0 employees to 1 employee and 0 number of repairs to 1, well, not 1, 6 windshields repaired. So if we go from 0 to 6, our marginal product of labor would be 6 because we repaired 6 extra windshields. And our marginal revenue product would be 300. Now, why is that? Well, let's remember, and this is just for an example, our marginal product of labor is 6 because we went from 0 to 6, and our price equals 50 because that's how much we're charging people for. And obviously, 6 times 50 equals 300. And so that's our marginal revenue product. Is there any questions about how I got that number? That's not the answer. I'm just sort of like going through like each of the steps. Okay. So going back to the question, which I know I'm jumping around a lot. Let's keep going. Obviously, hiring 1 employee, we got $300 from them, and it cost us $100 to hire them. So right now, our marginal benefit is greater than our marginal cost because 300 is higher than 100. Does anyone understand how I made that comparison? Okay, so let's move on to a second employee. We're still paying $100 for them because that's our wage for them. That's actually going to be the marginal cost for all of this because the wage doesn't change at all. And we went from 6 repairs to 11 repairs. That's an addition of 5 repairs because we went from 6 to 11. And so that's an increase of 5. And so that also means we have to find our marginal revenue product. And if we had an addition of 5, that means our marginal product of labor is also 5. And the price is still the same. It's still 50. So we do 5 times 50. And the marginal revenue product is 250. And obviously 250 is greater than 100. So we should hire a second employee. Does everyone understand how I got that, how I did that? Okay. If you have any questions, of course, just speak up. And so moving on to the third employee, again, marginal cost is still the same because it still cost us $100 to hire them. So that's all the same. And we go from 11 to 15 repairs. So that's an addition of 4. And that also means our marginal product of labor is 4. And so we do 4 times 50, and that equals 200. And that's our marginal revenue product. And so when we compare 200 to 100, 200 is still more than 100. So we should hire a third employee. Is everyone good with that so far?
Wait, real fast. You multiplied 2 by 50. Wouldn't you multiply 11 by 50? Because it's the windshields that are paired as the total price.
2 by 50. Where did I do that?
I may have misheard it. My internet is like unstable, but you're multiplying 50 by the total number of repairs to find the total like,
Not quite.
money earned that.
Not quite. We're multiplying 50 by the additional repairs we make, not the total amount of repairs we make.
Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Yeah, that's why like when we went from 6 to 11, we multiplied 50 by 5 because to go to 6 to 11, we do 5. We add 5, and that's also how we find the additional money on a very conceptual level. Marginal revenue marginal revenue product is the additional money you get by hiring another worker. And if the additional amount they're able to do is, let's say, 5, then we multiply 5 by 50 because they're able to do an extra 50 repairs, and each repair costs $50. Not 50, an additional 5 repairs, my apologies. If they're able to do an additional 5 repairs and each of them costs $50, then you get an additional $250. That's what marginal revenue product is on like a very conceptual level. So where was I? I believe I'm going on to the fourth employee. So when hiring a fourth employee, the marginal cost is still the same because the employee costs $100 to hire each day. So that's that. And so we go from 15 to 17, and that means we made an additional 2 repairs because 15 to 17 is an addition of 2. And so we times 2 by 50 and we get 100. That means our marginal cost and our marginal revenue product is the same. And we actually need to amend the definition I wrote earlier. It's great if the marginal benefit you receive from them is greater than or equal to the marginal cost of hiring them. So yes, we should hire a fourth employee because the benefit is not less than, it's equal to. Does everyone understand how I did all of that? Okay. And so obviously, let's go on to the fifth employee, and you guys might see what's happening. A fifth employee, the marginal cost is still 100 because, well, it still costs $100 to hire them. So that's that. But we go from 17 to 18. That means we only made 1 extra windshield repair. And it still cost us, sorry, my mind jumped back and forth for a second. If we only made 1 additional repair, we would do 1 times 50 because it still costs 150. We still charge people 150, not 150, 50. My apologies. So 1 times 50 is 50, and that's our marginal revenue product. However, our marginal cost is 100, and I'm sure you guys know this, 100 is more than 50. So we actually wouldn't hire a fifth employee because the money it cost us to hire them is more than the money they make for us. And so the answer for this would be D, because we should hire 4 employees because at 4, the marginal revenue product and the marginal cost are equal. So that's fine. We can hire a 4th employee. However, at a 5th employee, we actually start losing money because it still costs us 100 to hire them, but we only get $50 in return for their work. And so that's that. Are there any questions about this problem? Okay. And 3. Francine owns a restaurant and is considering expanding her restaurant and hiring more workers. However, she knows that if she does this, she will have to offer daily happy hour specials in order to get extra customers to come. This is an example of, let's just look through each of these terms and we'll sort of define them. Diminishing marginal product. Okay. Diminishing marginal product. What this basically says is that as you hire more workers, the marginal product of their marginal product of labor, decreases from the previous worker. That's what it looks like in practice. That's probably a lot more sophisticated in the book. Well, the best way to describe this is I want you to go back to the previous problem. You notice how initially we went from 0 to 6, so we made an additional 6 repairs, then we made an additional 5 repairs, then an additional 4, then 2, then 1. You notice how each additional worker made just a little bit less than the last worker? That's what this whole idea, that's what diminishing marginal product is. And let's look at our problem. What's going on here? She knows that if she does this, she will have to offer daily happy hour specials in order to get extra customers to come. Obviously, that's not what's happening right now. She's not making less from each employee. In fact, this isn't even something related to her employees, aside from the fact she needs to hire more workers. So we know A is not correct because it's a different type of problem. It's not about diminishing marginal product. Is there any questions about that? Okay. And so let's talk about declining output prices. Declining output prices basically says that as you produce more of a product, you will need to lower the price in order to incentivize consumers to buy more. And this is actually the right answer, because let's look at what's going on in this problem. She wants more people to come into her restaurant, so she's going to start offering specials, which is the equivalent of lowering the price, basically. And that's exactly what declining output prices is. It says that if you want to produce more, in this case, if you want more people to come into your restaurant, you're going to need to lower the prices in order to attract more customers. And so the answer for this would be B. I'll also explain what C is. Is there any questions about B? Okay. Labor capital substitution. Okay. This one's actually fairly straightforward. It says, as the wages of workers rise, firms will decide to to purchase machines more. Yeah, that's basically it. And why is this the case? Let's think about it. If, let's say the minimum wage right now is $12 or whatever it is, then it's cheap enough that if you buy an employee, they're always going to be cheaper than buying a machine. However, let's say the wage goes up to $30 an hour, which is a lot, but just bear with me. Then obviously it's going to be really expensive to hire a person. So you're kind of just better off just buying a machine and then dealing with like all the fixes and all the other problems, because at the end of the day, the machine will be cheaper than the person. And that's basically what labor capital substitution is. Is there any questions about that? And obviously this isn't happening in this case. There's nothing about her workers' wages or anything like that in this problem. Is there any problem? Not any problems. Any questions about 3? Okay. 4. Greg owns a company which manufactures dishwashers. He employs forklift drivers to move refrigerators around his factory and warehouse. Which of the following will increase the demand for forklift drivers? What I want you guys to remember is the rational rule for employers. And I'll say it again, just so you guys sort of refresh on it. It basically says you should hire one more employee if the marginal revenue product or the marginal benefit you receive from them is greater than or equal to their marginal cost. And I want you to remember that because that's in effect right now. And so that's basically the reason why A and B are not correct, and I'll explain why. A decrease in the price of forklifts. This doesn't matter because if our firm is using the the rational rule for employers, then they're already at a point where if they hire another employee, then they're going to start losing money, just like we saw with Jose's windshield repair shop. He could only hire 4 employees because anything past that, he would start losing money. And that's the exact situation here. Okay, forklifts became cheaper. That's irrelevant. His employees' wages are still the same. And so he can't hire another worker because of it. Is there any questions about that? Okay. And with B, an increase in the demand of dishwashers. It's the exact same thing. Sure, that's great that dishwashers are now back in style, I guess, but it doesn't matter because he can't hire another one because it would be costly to his business. So it doesn't matter that demand has gone up if he can't afford to hire another employee. Is there any questions about that? Okay, and by process of elimination, C is the correct answer, and I'll explain why. This one requires a little bit of illustrations. Okay. I know these lines aren't really, I say, spaced out properly, but just bear with me. We'll just say 4. And we'll say their wages $50 for that. So we'll say he made 6, made 11, made 13, and he made 8. And we'll say the price is $50 because it'll make it a little easier. So the most important part of this table right here is 3 and 4. You notice how it goes from 13 to 14, and if the price is 50, that means our marginal revenue product is also 50, and I'll type that out. Marginal revenue product is also 50 because we only sold 1 unit at a price of $50, so we only made $50. But the wage also costs. The wage is also $50. It's already up there. And so what we know is that we shouldn't hire another employee because anything past this point, we'll start losing money. So what management does is actually makes a worker more productive. If you have great management, then workers are very productive. And that's exactly what's happening here. Better management results in forklift drivers being more productive. And that means they all produce a little bit more. And I'll show you. Let's say he went from 6, now he's making 12. He's shipping 12 dishwashers or whatever he's shipping. Now this guy's shipping 21 or an additional 9. 29. We'll say 36. And what's important to note here is the marginal revenue product between 3 and 4. Again, we were able to ship an additional 7 dishwashers, and the price is still 50. And so the marginal revenue product is $350. But the wage is still 50. So do you notice how the marginal cost is now a lot less than the marginal revenue product? That means we should hire more employees because we're not quite at the point where our marginal revenue product equals our marginal cost. That's what productivity does. Each worker is able to do a little bit more. If each worker is able to do a little bit more, then your marginal revenue product per worker will also increase because they're able to ship and sell more units. That means for every worker, you're just making a little bit more money. And so that's that. Is there any questions about that? And the answer for this is C. Yeah, I already said that. So is there any questions? Okay. If you guys have any questions, just say something. Sometimes I feel like some people are lost and they just don't want to say anything, which, this is what these sessions are for. According to what we learned in class, what is the marginal cost of working for 1 hour if your hourly wage is $12 per hour? Okay, let's look through each of these answers. A, $12. That is not the case because you're earning $12 per hour. The marginal cost of hiring you as a worker may be $12, but that's the cost for the firms, not yourself. You're not giving up $12 to make $12. So yeah, that's that. B, 0. That is also not the case because marginal cost in terms of if you're working an extra hour is also your opportunity cost. You always give up something when you choose to do something. Even if it's the smallest little thing, you always give up to do something. So it's worth something. It's not worth $0. So yeah, B is not correct because you clearly gave up something. I forgot to say this, but marginal cost is basically code for opportunity cost as well. What's the opportunity cost of working for 1 hour? So that's that. C, 1 hour of leisure. This is actually the correct answer. And I want you guys to know this. You can either write this on your cheat sheet or whatever. The marginal cost of working will always be an additional hour of leisure. That's also the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of working is leisure. And you should probably write that on a note because I can see this type of question being on the exam. And so, yeah, if you're working, you're not like having fun, you're not enjoying yourself, you're working, so you're giving up leisure. So that's why C is correct, because that's what you gave up. D, 1 hour of work. This is not correct because you are working. That's not the cost of working. You can't say I gave up working to go working. It doesn't make any sense, obviously. So that's that. Is there any questions about this one? Okay. 6, Chad loves playing Valorant on his computer. He will work as much as necessary to afford his apartment, food, and other necessities, but he prefers to spend as much time as possible playing Valorant. If Chad gets a raise, we expect him to choose work blank. Okay, so the important part about this question is that we need to know what income and substitution effect is. And let's do just that. Income effect. The income effect basically states that as you make more money at work, you will work less hours since you don't need to work as much to afford your lifestyle. And there's a lot of reasons for this. Some people say like, oh yeah, if I just want to make a certain amount of money to support myself, then yeah, if I get a raise, I just need to work less hours. Another reason behind this is that people value their leisure. Why should I be making all this money if I'm not going to enjoy myself every once in a while? Yeah, that's the case. And the best way to describe this is imagine you have a $60 lifestyle every week. And you'll receive $6 per hour at work, which I know is below minimum wage, but bear with me. So obviously you need to work 10 hours in order to afford your $60 lifestyle. However, you receive a raise, and now you make $12 an hour. So you only need to work 5 hours a week in order to afford your $60 lifestyle. You notice how now you just need to work less amount of time because you have more money. So yeah, that's what the income effect is. And now let's describe the substitution effect. The substitution effect is effectively the opposite of the income effect. I mean, it basically says that as your wage increases, you will work more hours. That's extensively it. It's nothing crazy. So with, I realize what substitution. Anyways, that's what the substitution effect is. It basically just says as you see increases in your wage, you will work more hours. That's basically it. And so let's look at what Chad should do. So Chad wants to play Valorant as much as possible. So he'll only work just enough to afford the stuff he needs for life. Keep that in mind. So Chad will work fewer hours because for Chad, the income effect is very important. This is actually the correct answer because we know he wants to play Valorant as much as possible. And now that he's received a raise, he doesn't need to work as much because he can afford all of his necessities in a smaller amount of time. So yeah, that's why A is correct. And that also describes the income effect. He's going to be working less hours because he doesn't need to work as many hours. And in turn, he'll work fewer hours. Is there any questions about that? Okay, I'll explain B, C, and D as well. More hours because for Chad, the income effect is very important. This answer is a contradiction of itself. If the income effect is important, then he wouldn't be working more hours. The income effect says you work less hours, not more hours. So obviously B is not correct because it's a contradiction of itself. C, fewer hours because for Chad, the substitution effect is very important. This is just like B, it's also a contradiction of itself. If the substitution effect was important, he'd be working more hours, not fewer hours. So yeah, that's a contradiction. D, more hours because for Chad, the substitution effect is very important. On a very conceptual level, this is correct because if the substitution effect was important, then yes, he would be working more hours. However, we know that Chad will only work as much as necessary to afford his stuff. And so he wouldn't be working more hours because he'd already make a certain amount of money after a certain point. So, and we know he wants to play more of Valorant. So we know this wouldn't be the case because he doesn't want to work more hours. He wants to work just enough so he can afford his lifestyle. And so that's why A is the right answer. Is there any questions about this chapter at all? I'm just making sure all these are correct. Any questions about like things that weren't covered in these problems or anything? Okay. All this is clicking, right? I'm not just like talking and you guys are just quietly sitting there, right?
No, it's clicking, I swear.
Okay. Okay. Because this is for your guys' benefit, so I don't want to just ramble if this isn't useful.
No, this is
Okay.
really useful. Thank you.
Yep. All righty. And we're going on to wages. Kayla wants her employers to pay her 20% more for making night deliveries in a high crime neighborhood than the day delivery people receive. Most of the delivery people are willing to make night deliveries in the neighborhood for only 10% differential. Kayla is seeking, and this is where the problem ends. So what's important to note here is what is a compensating differential? Well, a compensating differential, after I type it, is basically a extra money for doing undesirable work. And so that it's exactly what it looks like. It's extra money for doing not really great work. Let's say you're a janitor. You would ask for a compensating differential because you're going to be doing a lot of very nasty things. So you don't want to get paid the regular amount. Let's say you're an auto worker like my dad who works in the assembly line. It's very backbreaking work. He's going to ask for extra money because it's very physically intensive. And there's a variety of reasons for this. Backbreaking labor, uncertain income, working in the night shift and other related stuff like that. So it's basically just extra money for not doing great work. And something I want you guys to note for this problem is the standard compensating differential is 10%. And it even says that in the problem. That means the regular compensating differential that most of her coworkers are being offered is 10%. So with that in mind, let's look at these answers. A compensating differential based on her individual concerns about the risk. Yes, that second half is correct because yeah, she is seeking one because she has individual concerns about the risk. However, she's not seeking a compensating differential. She's seeking more because a compensating differential is 10% in this scenario. She's seeking 20%. So she's not seeking compensating differential. She's seeking something even greater. That's why A is not correct. B, a compensating differential because others are undervaluing her concern. That is not a reason why. I guess it could be because that's why you'd ask for a compensating differential because you feel like there's even greater concern than you're being paid for. But again, it falls into the problem that she's not seeking a compensating differential. She's seeking something even higher. She's not seeking 10%, she's seeking 20%. And I guess she could feel like people are undervaluing her concerns, but it falls into the problem of she's not seeking a compensating, she's seeking something even more. So that's why B is not correct. C, less than a compensating differential because she's asking for more than others are. The sentence doesn't really make any sense for a couple of reasons. If she's asking for more than others are, she'd be receiving more than a compensating differential. So she wouldn't be receiving less. And even from a number standpoint, she's asking for 20% when the regular is 10%. So obviously she's asking for more, not less than 10%. So that's one thing. But also she would be receiving more if she's asking for more, not be receiving less. That's another thing. As you can tell, some of these answers don't really make any sense, but it's best to try to explain them, I suppose. D, more than a compensating differential because she has greater concern than most workers. That is correct. If the standard differential is 10% and she's seeking 20%, then she's seeking more than a standard differential. And she's only seeking it because she has even more concern than other people. Like imagine there's a spider on my wall and I'm not going to kill it. I'd rather pay someone else to kill it, which is weird, but bear with me. I ask person one, and they're afraid of spiders. They'll be like, okay, I'll kill it for $12. And so they kill it. I pay them and they kill it. However, person two is even more afraid of spiders than person one. And they'll be like, I'll kill that spider for, I don't know, $15. So yeah, that person is seeking even more of a differential because they have even greater concerns about the job I'm giving them. Is there any questions about one? And the answer for one is D, by the way. No questions? Okay. By the way, we're getting through this a lot faster than the last session. I spent almost 50 minutes on chapter 1 last time. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Human capital is, the best way to answer this one is just another definition. It's B. It's basically any knowledge or skills that a worker might have that could lead to them being more productive. And the reason why I just outright gave you the answer is because I tried looking up each of these and they may be something real, but I couldn't find them. So as far as I know, A, C, and D aren't definitions of anything that's real. So it's hard to sort of describe or define something that isn't a real term. So that's why that's that, basically. Is there any questions about that?
No, I think we're good on that one.
Okay. Which of the following statements is true regarding discrimination in labor markets? When discrimination occurs, all workers are treated equally. Obviously, this is the throwaway answer, but let's explain this a little bit more. When discrimination occurs, the end product is that workers are not treated equally. Discrimination is basically, how I say, preference to one group or one thing over another thing. It's not prejudice as most people would say it is. Prejudice is sometimes how discrimination manifests itself, but it's not always the case. So yeah, A is not correct because it's actually the opposite. Workers would be treated unequally. B, if two workers in the same job have different salaries, one is a victim of discrimination. That is also not correct. And here's why. There's a lot of things that go into why two people get paid differently. One of them is productivity. Let's say one person makes 50 cars while another person only makes 25. Obviously, the person who's making 50 cars is going to get paid more because they're just doing more. Another thing is human capital. There's a reason why people who have certain degrees get paid more than other people. That's why a teacher with a undergraduate degree gets paid less than a teacher who has a doctorate degree. It's just that human capital is very valued in the workplace, and it's one way of firms seeing how productive you are. And so that's just a couple of reasons why people get paid differently who are in the same jobs. There's plenty of other reasons, but obviously B is not correct. C, if average incomes differ across groups of workers, there is discrimination. This is also not correct because, like we were talking about with the compensating differentials, there's different worker groups do different things. Obviously, my dad, who does back-breaking work in the assembly line, he gets paid more than some kid getting your burger ready at McDonald's. And that's another thing. Part-time workers get paid less than full-time workers. And people who work more, let's say an office worker who works 40 hours a week, they get paid more than some guy selling, I don't know, ice cream for 5 hours a week. Obviously, people who work more get paid more. There's a variety of reasons for why people get paid differently. And more specifically, there's a variety of reasons why certain groups of workers get paid differently. And D, by process of elimination, the answer is D. And it basically is a culmination of everything I've explained so far. Discrimination accounts for only part of the differences in wages across groups of workers. And that's exactly the case. Like I told you, productivity determines wage. Human capital determines wage. Seniority determines wage. There's a lot of things that determine wage. It's not just, oh yeah, discrimination or something like that. It plays a role, I'll say that much, but it doesn't play the entire role though. And so that's that. Is there any questions about that? Okay. And going on to 4. Okay, this one. Let's write out these definitions. I know people get a little confused about this. So let's just be straightforward. Monopoly is a market where there is one seller. That's it. There are not a whole lot of monopolies in the US. In fact, I can't even think of one. I said like local utility providers, but sometimes that's not even the case. But I'm sure most people know what a monopoly is. It's when there's only one seller. Like the oil companies back then, there was only like one big oil company back in like the 1910s or something like that. But monopolies are not as common nowadays. I'm sure they're still around, but that's that. However, what most people probably are wondering about is what a monopsony is. I'm pretty sure I spelled that wrong, but that's okay. It's literally the opposite of a monopoly. It's a market where there is one buyer. I actually really like the professor's example about this, which is basically the NCAA is a monopsony. They're the only people who are buying amateur athletes or giving work to amateur athletes. If you don't want to work for the NCAA or play sports for them, who else are you going to go to? They basically run the show in terms of amateur and collegiate sports. And I'm not very well versed in sports, so that may not be the case, but just bear with me. But yeah, so a monopsony is just a market where there's one buyer. It's the opposite of a monopoly. If you know what a monopoly is, you know what a monopsony is. It's just the opposite. And if you really need to, I would write it on your sheet. But that's what a monopsony is. And by explaining the definitions of both, I also gave you the answers for this. It's C. So 4 is C. And I'll explain through each of these other answers. In monopoly, there is one unit of product. I think that's called a shortage, not really a monopoly. And in a monopsony, there is one price. That is not the case because there's a variety of different prices, especially when we talk about market power, and we'll talk about that later. But yeah, there isn't just one price. There's a variety of different prices because they may pay different prices for a variety of different reasons. And B, a monopoly there is one price, and a monopoly there is one unit of product. Again, it's not correct. In a monopoly, there can be a variety of different prices. It just depends on like output and all of that. In a monopoly, there's one unit product. Again, there's also a throwaway. One unit product is, I don't know, a shortage. And we know C is correct, and D is literally just the flipping of the definitions. And so just remember, monopoly, there is one seller. In a monopsony, there is one buyer. Is there any questions about that? Okay. Five. Why can't a company with a monopoly power in its labor market succeed in paying low wages? Oh, let's think about what a monopsony is. It's the only buyer of a certain type of product or a certain type of labor or something like that. Let's look at each of these definitions. Workers don't have other employment options. This is actually the right answer. And let's think about it. If it's a monopsony, then there is only one buyer of that specific type of labor. So let's imagine there's only one hospital in all of the Lansing area. If you don't want to work for them, then where are you going to go? You can't be a nurse somewhere else. You can't be a doctor somewhere else because there isn't somewhere else. There's just one hospital. It's either them or nowhere. And that's why they can get away with paying a low wage, because they're going to be like, hey, you either want to take this like $9 an hour wage, or you're going to have no wage. Where are you going to go work? You're not going to go work anywhere because there's nowhere else to work. And so that's why A is correct, because they're the only show in town, basically. B, the employer doesn't have other options for employees. If anything, this would shift supply to the left and cause an increase in wage because there's not that many employees. And paying a low wage would be a great way of pushing them away from you rather than attracting them to work for you. And C is the very same idea. You shouldn't pay a low wage if there's not that many people who can do your job. That's one of the basic things with supply. If supply moves to the left while demand stays center, then price or wage will rise. D, must charge a low product price so it cannot afford to pay a high wage. There's nothing saying it needs to charge a low product price. I don't even really know what that means, but and by product that means the second half isn't correct because there's nothing limiting it from charging a higher product price. And that also means that they should pay a higher wage. Is there any questions about that? Okay. 6. Which of the following is not among the main factors affecting wages? Well, we already talked about discrimination. We talked about how it does affect wages. It just isn't the entire reason wages are different. There's a lot of other factors, such as regulation and institutional factors. Now, what are these? These are basically laws and regulations put in place to make sure the market's a certain way. And probably the most famous example that most people are familiar with is, after I get this graph up, so the most common example is the minimum wage. That's a regulation or an institutional factor. It's basically a law saying, hey, the wage can be this low. And obviously, if you think about it, let's say we do raise the minimum wage to $15. People who are getting $12 minimum wage will now receive $15. So that does affect wages. And that also means that you can't go lower than that anymore. So it moves all wages to at least $15 if it's not already above it. And that's one way that institutional forces affect wages. Another way, in a more graphical way, is through licensing. Licensing. So let's say right now in Michigan, you don't need to have a license to be a teacher. That probably explain a lot about our econ professor, I guess. But let's say you don't need a license to be a teacher. And now Michigan says you do need a license and you need to go through all this training, you need to do all of this and that. Some people just aren't willing to do that. So that's actually going to move the labor curve to the left over here, because there's not a lot of people. Well, there's a lot of people, but there's been a decrease in the supply because a lot of people got kicked out of the market because they don't want to go through licensing and training and all of that. So the supply moved to the left, and you noticed how now the wage is up because the y-axis describes wages. We went from down here all the way up here. That's how waging occurs. And the opposite is true. Let's say right now in Louisiana, you need a license to sell water or something like that, and they got rid of that law, and now a ton of people can sell water. That means the supply will move to the right, and you know what? Wages now go down because there's tons of people selling water now. So that's that. And so that's two examples how regulation and institutional factors work. So that's that. And labor demand. This one's also fairly straightforward, and I'm sure most people can infer this just by knowing what happens with demand and stuff. So let's say in the winter, there's a large demand for like snowplowers. And now we're in the summer, which I know we're not, but just imagine we are. And so demand goes to the left because we don't need snowplowers in the summer, obviously. Obviously, wage goes down because they're not doing as much. And also there's just isn't that much demand for them. So people don't really need them, so their wage would decrease. And so that's how labor demand works. And I guess I can also show the opposite as well. Let's say Tesla wants to ramp up production of their cars and their labor demand goes up and the curve goes to the right. Now the wage goes up because, well, they want to attract more people to come work for them, and there's greater demand for them. So it's more competitive to get people. So that's that. Is there any questions? And so,
Sorry.
yep.
So
You
the
guys
only thing
understand?
that's not affecting the wages are compliments.
Yes. And we're
So
about, yes.
what were compliments?
What are compliments?
Yeah, what does he mean by that? Does he mean like the complements and substitutes? Is that what he's talking about?
Yes, it's kind of like that where let's say you all are my workers and I decide to give you guys coffee. That's not going to affect your wages. It's not.
Oh, okay. I remember that example now. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
That's basically it. Yep.
So it's
And
just
so-
like, I'm sorry, it's just like stuff the like the manager, like the
Yeah,
higher
it's-
up do to motivate.
Yeah, it's like small stuff management and like administration give their workers to like motivate them to work. That doesn't really affect their wages.
Okay, I get you. It's not affecting like how much they're earning or anything. It's just to motivate them like
Yep.
once in a while.
Yep. And I would these are actually the only three factors that A, B, and C are the only three factors that affect wages. You can even go back and check the slides. They're the only three things that affect wages. So let's say we see this again, but it's not compliments and it's like, who knows what? Just remember A, B, and C are right. They're the only things that will ever affect wages. You can go back to the slides and look at them as well. So just remember A, B, and C are always going to be right. Unless this gets changed, then it's like which factor is among the main factors affecting wages. But anyways, to 7. Was there any questions about that? I forgot to ask. Okay. 7. Unions try to blank union members by blank. Ensure more jobs by reducing wages. I think this goes without saying, but unions don't reduce wages. They try to raise wages. That's not something like crazy. I'm sure most people already know that. So already A is not correct. And I guess they could ensure more jobs by reducing wages because some people just don't want to work at like $8 or something like that. But we know that's not what unions do. B, ensure more jobs by raising wages. That doesn't work in an economic sense, and I'll show you guys why. So let's say I assume they mean like increasing supply, I suppose. So let's increase supply. the wages went down because there's more people working now. So that's not how raising wages work. If you increase the amount of people working or in a market, then firms are going to be comfortable paying less because there's plenty of other people who would take your job. So that's that. And also, unions just don't try to ensure jobs, more jobs. They try to raise wages. That's what unions are for. C, raise wages by shifting the supply curve to the left. This is actually the correct answer. And let me show you guys how. So they say let's shift the supply curve to the left. Now let's do that. No, that's not pretty, but that's fine. Notice how it went from right here to right here. Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm screen sharing. So yeah, it went from right here, to right here. And wages obviously went up. And that's what happens when you shift the supply curve to the left. Well, let's shift the supply curve to the right then, because that's what D is. And it will explain why that's wrong. Shifting supply curve to the right. Wages actually went down. And that's exactly what happens when the union ensures more jobs. So that's what happens. Is there any questions about that? Oh yeah, I should probably tell you what the answer is. The answer is C. Is there any questions about that?
Could you just explain like why when it moves up the, I'm sorry, could you go back to the graph for like a quick second?
Yep.
Yeah, so if it moves to the left, the wages go higher, basically. It's like the same thing you said before. So the union's job is specifically just to raise the wages, which is why when it goes to the left, there's just a higher like wage price in general, I guess, like the average, correct?
Yeah. The union's job is to raise wages. That's the union's job. So the ensure job thing just doesn't make sense on a fundamental level because that's not what unions are for. But also, by shifting it to the left, that's the only way you can raise wages. If you shift it to the right, then you'd actually be lowering wages. So I would encourage you if you see a problem like this on the exam, which it's a very specific problem, but I would draw it out and actually draw out what they're telling you. Oh, like you see on the problem says, oh, it'll shift the demand curve to the right. And I know it moves the supply curve, but just bear with me. Let's say it moves the demand curve to the right, which in this case would be lower. Wait, yeah, it'd be increasing wages. Actually, let's say it moves the demand curve to the left. Obviously, that doesn't increase wages. The y-axis is the price, and in the labor market, the price is also the wage. So I'd encourage you guys when you're doing the exam, if we see a problem like this, just graph it out. Just graph it out. It's not a whole lot of time. It's better to get 1 out of 30 right than to get one problem wrong that you knew you could have gotten right. So yeah, that's just a little bit of Kyle advice there.
Thank you.
Yep. Is there any other questions?
I think we're good.
Alrighty, let's keep going. Let me just make sure the screen shares. Okay. Now we're on to inequality. Okay, this one's not amazing because it's a bunch of just really specific definitions and stuff, but I'll try my best to explain all of them. So,
Hey, I gotta head out, but thank you so much for doing this. I'll definitely be here tomorrow for this too.
yep, no problem. And I'll see you then, or I'll hear you then. Yep, see you. Alrighty, let's keep going. So the poverty line is a measure that is used to define relative poverty and is based on housing and food costs. This isn't correct because that definition actually belongs to, I believe, like the SPM measurement or something like that. And it does exactly what what this definition says. It defines relative poverty and is based on housing and food costs. So that's not the poverty line. That's the SPM measurement or whatever. B, an estimate of the minimum income needed to provide a comfortable standard of living. This is actually the definition for a livable wage. It's basically the wage that someone should be paid if they wanted to live comfortably and get paid well. So that's basically what B is. C, an income level determined by the government below which a family is defined to be in poverty. This is actually the right answer. That obviously the poverty line, I'm sure we're all at least familiar with it. Anything above, anyone above it is not in poverty. Anyone below it is in poverty. And it's a line, obviously. It's not a measurement or an estimate of income. It's literally just a line on a graph and it tells you, like, if you're above, you're doing okay. If you're below, then you're in a bit of trouble. And D, an income level set by the poor to identify the income needed to cover their basic needs. This is the throwaway answer for this question, because obviously the poor don't set the income level. It's the government who sets it, because there's a variety of factors they need to take into account, like, oh, where you live, the current economic situation, and a lot of stuff. It's not just something the poor decide. I know this one's a little more choppy. It's just because a lot of these are just definitions for other terms and not the poverty line. But is there any questions? Okay.
Just really fast, really fast. So like the way, like for me, I'd get like, I might get confused in A and C, but the reason that C is the right answer is that because the government itself, like the poverty line is a government issued like income level. So because the government is the one that issues it and regulates it, that's why C is correct answer, right?
Yes, and I also want you to remember, it is not a measure. It does not measure anything. It's simply like, let's say, oh, you make 17,000. If you're above that, you're not in poverty. If you're below that, then you are in poverty. It's not a measure. It's an income level. That should be the dead giveaway for you. Income level or measure. It's these small little words that can make a huge difference. Does that sort of answer and help you?
Yeah, that does help. Thank you.
Yep. So this one's also just more like abstract thinking, but just bear with me, like always. So, which of the following statements is true regarding views on what is fair? Everyone tends to agree that things should be fair, but everyone does not agree on exactly what is fair. This is actually the correct answer, and it just kind of takes a little bit of thinking, because I'm sure all like 5 people in this chat can say that, yeah, everything should be fair, but I'm sure we wouldn't agree on what counts as fair. And if you pay attention to politics at all, that's kind of the crux of like half of our issues right now. Like people say, oh, the minimum wage should be raised. We should have free healthcare and free education, all of that. And we can debate if those are the right ways. But the problem is that we don't agree on it. And that's exactly where the second part goes. Not everyone agrees on what counts as fair. So yeah, A is correct. And I'll also explain why B, C, and D are not correct. Everyone tends that things should be fair, and everyone tends to agree what is fair. Obviously, everyone believes things should be fair. That's just some very common sense. And everyone tends to agree on what is fair. That is not the case, because obviously some people think we should invest more in social programs. Some people think we should, I don't know, not invest as much in all of that. So obviously we don't agree on what is fair, but we do agree that things should be fair. And so that's that. See, few believe that things should be fair. Already, this is not correct, because everyone believes that things should be fair. And everyone does not agree on exactly what exactly is fair. Again, plenty of people believe things should be fair. And it is true that we don't agree on what counts as fair. But again, it's the beginning that really gets this wrong. My bad. See, few believe that things should be fair, but everyone tends to agree on what is fair. Again, a lot of people believe what should be fair. Not everyone believes what is fair. Plenty of people believe that things should be fair. We just don't agree on what counts as fair. It's just kind of, I don't think this is as difficult as I'm making it sound, but I'm just explaining it just in case. Does anyone have any questions about this?
I think this one was good.
Yeah. It's the only problem I think some people might have is that they overthink it and think it's like some kind of like 9D chess or something like that. Anyways, going on to 3. Table. Average income and distribution of income data provides recent data for the World Bank on average income and the distribution of income in 4 countries. Let's look at each of these. Bangladesh is 1,000, Uganda is 1,000, Sri Lanka is 3,000, and Mongolia is 3,000. Give me a moment, I need to clear my. Okay, I'm back. Okay, already we can mark Bangladesh and Mongolia off. And why is that? It's because even among like the $1,000 average income, Bangladesh lags behind in terms of total income earned by the top quintile to Uganda. Like sure, average income's the same, but already Bangladesh's top quintile earns a lot less than Uganda's top quintile. Already, Uganda's already going to be more than Bangladesh. And the same thing with Mongolia. Sri Lanka is simply, their top quintile simply owns more than Mongolia. So we can already mark off Mongolia and Bangladesh. So really the only actual debate is between Sri Lanka and Uganda. And the answer for this is actually Sri Lanka. And why is that? Let me tell you why. Sure, Uganda, their top quintile owns more relative, not earns more, I'd say they own a higher percentage. Okay, that's the best way to say it. They own a higher percentage than Sri Lanka. However, the average income in Uganda is only 1,000, and Sri Lanka's average income is 3,000. And the analogy I used for this in the last study session was that's like saying you ate 88% of a small pizza. Sure, that might seem like a lot, but your friend over there ate 82% of a large pizza. Sure, you ate a higher percentage, but overall, your friend ate more than you simply because they had more to eat. And so Sri Lanka simply just has a bigger pie than Uganda does to own. And so the answer is C. Is there any questions about that?
Could I do it in a different method where I were to narrow it down to Sri Lanka and Mongolia first based on the income, and then look at the percent of total income earned in the top quartile? Because that would give me the same answer of Sri Lanka.
Yeah, I suppose you could do that if you do end up getting the right answer. However, this may not be the exact same on, like, let's say the exam. So that method may leave you a bit astray, just because if the income difference is not nearly as big, then let's say a 40.6% difference or a 49.8% difference could easily throw that entire method off. But I see where you're coming from there. And so I would say, yeah, it does work, but I'd just be very cautious when using it.
So you would recommend first looking at the percent total income earned, see the top two that way, then see what the actual income is based on that, to see who's like really earning the most.
Yeah, I'd say I did that, but there's probably a better way to do it, to be quite honest. That's just how I see it. But I do like your way. I just be very cautious when using it, just because like very small differences can easily throw that off.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. 4. Is there any other questions, by the way? Okay. Social insurance programs do not, and for this, I'm actually I actually have my notes out. Nice. So let's talk about social insurance programs. A lot of people conflate social insurance programs with social safety nets, and they're different. They're different. Social safety nets are meant to help and protect the most vulnerable in our society, like the poor, the ill, and there's plenty of people who get social safety net programs, but not everyone gets social safety nets. Obviously, people who have middle-class incomes, they're not getting Medicaid. Is that the one for the poor? Yeah, obviously they're not getting Medicaid because they don't qualify for Medicaid. However, a social insurance program is actually something that covers everyone. It insures everyone, as you may be able to tell by the phrase. And examples of this would be Social Security, Medicare. It insures everyone at the age of 65 and over. And there's a variety of different social insurance programs. And I just want to note this because I got these two definitions confused, and I can easily see them confusing people on the exam. So I'd also write that on your note sheet if you worry that you might mistake them. But regardless, let's look at some of these answers. Set individual benefits based on past incomes. This is not the correct answer, and I'm actually going to refer to the book on this. You see my highlight right here. It says Social Security, unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, and disability insurance payments are all partially a function of your past earnings. So yeah, as we see by that definition, yes, they do set individual benefits based on your past income. B, obtain revenue through program-specific taxes. This is also not correct because there are plenty of fees and taxes for each program. There's a Medicare fee or tax that you have to pay, and it comes out of your paycheck. I believe there's a tax or a fee for Social Security. There's a lot of different taxes and fees for each of these individual programs. And I'm sure most of you guys already knew that. That's nothing crazy. Cover both rich and poor. This is also not correct because an example would be Medicare. After the age of 65, you receive Medicare. You can be rich, you receive Medicare. You can be poor, you receive Medicare. Workers' compensation. You could get injured on the job while you're rich. You probably still qualify for workers' compensation. You could be injured while you're poor. You still get workers' compensation. Social insurance programs don't discriminate based on your past earnings or anything like that. And byproduct, D's the actual answer. And the best way to explain this is that social insurance programs, they cover everyone. So they don't use means tests to qualify people for benefits. They may use means tests to see how much you receive in benefits, but they don't use that as a determinant of whether or not you actually receive benefits at all. Does that make sense? I guess an example would be all of us are on Medicare, I guess. Let's say one of you guys makes $1 million a year. You're probably going to receive just like, I don't know, like a couple $100 or a couple thousand for Medicare expenses. While let's say someone who is who only makes $20,000 a year, which is not a lot, receives like $10,000 or $12,000 in benefits. While we received a difference in benefits, the main thing I want to point out is that we all received benefits. It's just different amounts of benefits. So D is correct because it doesn't prevent people from getting benefits. It just prevents people from getting certain amounts of a benefit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that.
All right. My thoughts starting to hurt. 5. Social safety nets, social insurance, and progressive tax systems are all types of income blinks programs that have the impact of moving income distribution blank equality. So let's look at like the first phrases first. Redistribution or replacement. The answer is actually redistribution, and we have to think about it in a more grander sense, I suppose. So how we do social safety net programs in social insurance in this country is that we use a progressive tax system that takes a lot of tax dollars from the rich in society and they redistribute that to the more needy in society through like a variety of programs such as Medicaid, unemployment insurance, and plenty of other programs. That's sort of like our American way of taking money from the rich and giving it back to the poor. We're basically buying certain services and things that the poor need that they could otherwise not afford. And income replacement, if what I see is correct, it's basically just paying people a certain amount of, it's basically just paying people income that they would have otherwise earned through working at a job. That's what income replacement seems like to me. We didn't really learn much about it, but that's what I see it as. And obviously that's not the case. That's not what, like Medicare doesn't just send you a check for like $50,000 every year or something like that. And so moving on to the second one, that have the impact of moving income distribution blanket equality closer to or further from. And by the way, I've been talking, I'm sure you guys can tell, it's closer to, because obviously we're taking money from the most well-off in society and we're giving it to those who may need it the most. And that's in order to help them move closer to equality, because they will no longer need to pay to, I don't know, go see the doctors or go to school or something like that. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Alrighty. A lot of this stuff is kind of just like abstract definitions and stuff, so just want to make sure everyone's understanding it. Alrighty. Is there any questions about inequality in general?
Honestly, I'm not gonna lie, that entire thing just kind of confused me. Could you go over it again? I'm so
Which one? Like number 5?
yeah, number 5. That part, I don't know, just confused me a little bit.
Yep, that's perfectly fine. So, social safety nets and social insurance programs and progressive tax systems are all types of income redistribution. Redistribution is basically taking money from a certain group of people and giving it to another group of people. And in this case, we redistribute the income of the rich because we tax them quite a bit, and then we give them back to the more needy in society, the poor, the ill, the elderly. And we use those tax dollars to buy stuff like healthcare, education, and all sorts of stuff. And it's called redistribution because we're not like plugging in more money. We're just taking money from one group and moving it to another. That's why it's called redistribution. We're redistributing the money from the rich and giving it to the poor. Does that make sense so far?
Okay, yeah, that does make sense. Yep.
All right. And do you want me to explain the second half as well?
I got the second half because it makes a lot more sense, but like I don't know why, but the redistribution replacement was just confusing me.
Yeah. I don't think we even learned about income replacement, so I'd just be wary of that. But other than that, is there any other questions about what's it called? Inequality?
I think I'm good, thank you.
Alrighty. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay. Which of the following is not true about imperfect competition? A note, you can also call imperfect competition market power. They're interchangeable as far as I know. So let's describe what market power is, because kind of has a bit of a hefty definition. Okay. That's not a good font. Market power is basically a firm's ability to raise its price and not lose customers. I don't know why I spelled it that way. Anyways, it's a firm's ability to rate. Oh man, I'm really bad. Okay. It's a firm's ability to raise prices and not lose customers. That's it. Is there any questions about that? Okay. So how does a firm gain market power? There's two means through which a firm gains market power. One of which is competitors. The number of competitors matters. And I'll say more equals less MP, which is market power, while less equals more MP. Man, that did not turn out as well as I'd hope. There we go. So what does this mean? It means that if you have more competitors in a market, then you have less market power. While if you have less competitors, then you have more market power. Does that make sense? Okay. And the second factor that contributes to market power is product differentiation. I'm pretty sure I didn't spell that right, but we'll just move on. And this basically just means as your product is more different, Actually, I think unique is probably the better way to say it. Unique, you have more market power. So an example of this would be, let's say you make a very special type of soft drink. You're the only one that makes it. You obviously have quite a bit of market power because you're the only person that sells your very unique type of drink. Well, let's say you just sell generic water, you have very low market power because there's plenty of other people that can sell water. There's nothing special about yours. So with all that in mind, let's go back to the question. Which of the following is not true about imperfect competition? Greater product differentiation decreases market power. This is not correct because it's the opposite. If you have greater product differentiation, it increases your market power. You get more market power because your product is very special and unique. So A is not correct. Is there any questions about that? Okay. B, a smaller number of sellers in a market increases, well, actually, never mind. A is correct. It's one of those problems that's saying which one is wrong, and A is technically right because it's not true. So yeah, A is not correct. My bad. I completely skipped over that. So I'll explain why B, C, and D are not technically correct. B, a small number of sellers in a market increases market power. That is correct. If you have only a few competitors, then it increases your market power, just like we talked about. C, imperfect competition among buyers gives them bargaining power. Yeah, imperfect competition lets you change prices to how you please. And obviously, if prices are changing, there's going to be lower and higher prices. Buyers are obviously going to be buying from the lower prices. D, sellers with market power can use independent pricing strategies. The whole idea of market power is that you have the ability to change your price without losing many customers. And so that gives way to an independent pricing strategy because you can change your price to how you please and you don't need to worry about losing customers. Is there any questions about one? Okay. Based on the rational rule for sellers, how does a manager set price and quantity? If the company has no market power, the marginal cost, I'll say equals price. And I'll explain why. Before we did market power, all of the supply graphs we looked at were all market power, not all market power, were all non-market power graphs. They were all non. And so how firms figured out price and stuff was that whenever marginal cost met marginal benefit, that would be where we set our price and our quantity. And so this is just tapping into what we learned before, and that's it. If the company has market power, the marginal cost is less than price. And so the answer is C. And I will actually save this for later because the best way to describe this is to show it to you guys on a graph. And that's what problem 7 is. So I'm going to save to explain that second half later to you guys. Was there any questions about the first half? No? Okay. 3. Oh yeah, 2C, my bad. 3. A characteristic of monopolistic competition that is not present in any other market structure is that I want to explain what monopolistic competition is because I think a lot of people are getting confused with oligopoly. And obviously the best way to explain this is to write down a definition for you guys. Monopolistic competition is a market where there are many sellers that sell a similar product. They gain market power by differing their price and product attributes. So what does this mean? A monopolistic competition is basically a market where there's a lot of people selling a pretty similar item, and the way they sort of differentiate themselves and gain market power is by having a slightly different product and selling it at a slightly different price. An example of this would be the jeans industry. Most people would say that, yeah, most of the jeans are the same. They're slightly different, maybe slightly different color, different make, and all of that. However, one would say the market has a lot of competitors. There's like Levi's, there's like 500 and First, there's plenty of people in the market, and they differentiate themselves by making slightly different jeans, and they sell it at slightly different prices. So that industry is actually monopolistic competition. And an oligopoly, I'll write this definition down as well. Oligopoly is a market where there are few sellers that interact and base their actions off of one another. And an oligopoly, there's a couple of oligopolies I can think of. One would be like the cell phone industry. You can think of Apple, Samsung, Android, and those are basically the major players. And let's say Android's about to release Samsung's about to release a new phone, then Apple's going to release a new phone. They kind of base their decisions off one another. Another industry that's relatable is the console industry. There's basically just Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo, and there's also PC, but whatever. They're all basing stuff off of each other. Like when Sony slashes the price of the PS4, the price of the Xbox One will also go down because Microsoft wants to stay competitive with Sony, and Nintendo's off doing their own thing. So those are some examples of an oligopoly. The main distinction I want you guys to remember is an oligopoly has few sellers, while monopolistic competition has many sellers. So is there any questions about those? All right. So 3, the characteristic of a monopolistic competition that is not present in any other market structure is that there is only one seller, and that seller holds a high level market power. This is actually a monopoly. I'm sure you guys could tell, because a monopoly is a market where there's only one seller. So we already know what a monopoly is, so we can just move on. B, are many sellers, and each product produces its own, each producer produces its own version of that product. This is actually the right answer. And I'm just making sure because waiting to the point where I'm a little tired. All right, a small number of sellers who have market power. Okay, yeah, B is the right answer. Because let's think about what the definition of monopolistic competition was. It's a market with many sellers who sell their own unique version of a product. And that's exactly what B is. And so that's the definition of monopolistic competition, basically. C, are a small number of sellers who have market power. This is an oligopoly, like we were talking about. There's a small number of sellers, and each of them hold quite a bit of market power. And so that's an oligopoly. And one way you can also think about it is, as far as I know, oligopoly is the only one where there's only a few sellers. Monopoly only has one. Monopolistic competition has many. Perfect competition has many. And oligopoly has a few. So keep that in mind. Oligopoly is the only one that we learned about that only has a few sellers. D, are many sellers that produce identical products. This is actually perfect competition. And I didn't get to do this in the last group because we're running low on time. But perfect competition is a market where there are many sellers that sell identical products. That's what a perfect competition market is. An example would be water. There's plenty of people who sell water, and no matter where you go, water is water. Sure, it may taste a little different, but it's water. There's nothing special about it. There are a few things about them. In this market, firms don't set prices; they're price takers. That just basically translates that there's a market price, and firms aren't gonna like go out of the way to change the price. Like you may go to the store and notice that all the water is around the same general price. Also, it's like that crazy like vitamin water or whatever. But as you may see, that generally water is the same price. Each of them have low market power. Each firm has low market power. And why is that? That's because they literally have all the opposite attributes of high market power. There's a lot of competitors, and they sell a very, very bland product. There's nothing special about that water to this water. It's a very regular, plain product. And that's basically perfect competition. And so the answer for this would be B. By the way, is it helpful that I explain why the other ones are not right? I've always wondered that, but I forgot to ask a lot of
It
times.
is helpful, yeah.
All right, that's good. That's good.
Real fast, hey Carla, just a quick question. How much left do you think we have to cover? I just want to know if I should start getting ready for office hours now or after.
You're wondering how much we have left to cover?
Yeah, I have office hours, and I just want to know if I should go like get ready now or if I should wait till the end.
We have around 4 problems left, and then we have game theory, which is like 4 problems. So we have 8 problems left.
Okay.
And depending on how hard game theory is for you guys, that could go by quickly or pretty slowly, but it depends.
Okay. And then I think I have to head out, but thank you so much. And then you guys are meeting on tomorrow on Monday, right?
Yep, I'm meeting twice on Monday and I'm meeting 3 times on Wednesday.
All right. Thank you. I'll see you then. Bye.
Yep, bye. Alrighty, moving on. In which of the following situations would Maria's donut shop have the least market power? Remember, market power is determined by how many competitors you have and how unique your product is. So let's look at each of these. Within 3 miles, there are 5 other donut shops and 3 bakeries that sell breakfast pastries. This is actually the right answer, and let's think about it. Maria, in this scenario, has 8 competitors. She has 5 donut shops and 3 bakeries. 3 of her competitors sell a differentiated product, so she's kind of unique in regard to them. However, she has 5 competitors who sell close to the exact same thing as her. So as you can tell, she has a lot of competitors, and a lot of those competitors sell a very similar product to her. So she has very low market power in this. B, there are 2 rival donut shops within 3 miles, but no other bakeries. This one, she has more market power than A because she only has 2 competitors, and there are no bakeries. However, those 2 competitors sell a very similar product to her. So she still doesn't have a lot of market power, but she still has more market power than A. C, the closest donut shop is 10 miles away, but there's a bakery with breakfast pastries 2 miles away. In this scenario, her worst competitor would be the donut shop because it sells a very similar product. However, that's 10 miles away, so that's almost something she doesn't need to worry about. And she has a breakfast pastry, not a breakfast pastry, a bakery that she needs to deal with. However, the bakery sells a differentiated product from her, so that also means her product is differentiated. So it's not that big of a threat. So she has more market power in this case than she does with B. And going on to D, the closest donut shop or bakery is 25 miles away from Maria's shop. She basically doesn't have any competition in this scenario. Sure, there's a donut shop 25 miles away, but effectively in her area, she's the only show in town. So she has the most market power because she's effectively the only donut shop in town. Is there any questions about that? Okay, 5. When a seller has a high level market power, the seller produces a product that is identical to the output of other companies. That's not the case because we know that we gain high market power from having a very unique product. And if you're selling an identical product, then chances are your market power is not that high. B is in a market with growing demand. That is not the case. 2 examples would be Coca-Cola and McDonald's. Both of them have a lot of market power in their industry. However, the fast food and the soft drink industry are both declining industries. So not necessarily. You can have high market power and be in a stagnating or declining industry. An example would be Blockbuster. They had probably some of the highest market power in the movie rental business. However, as we know, the movie rental business is basically dead at this point. C is one of many sellers selling in its market. That is also not correct, and here's why. One of the factors, along with product differentiation, was that you didn't have a lot of competitors. Obviously, in this case, you have a lot of competitors, so you shouldn't have a high market power. So C is not correct. And then by process of elimination, D is correct. And It says can raise its prices without losing many customers. That's the exact definition of market power, the ability to raise prices without losing customers. And obviously that's only, you can only do that if you have high market power. You have low market power, people will just go somewhere else. So that's that. C, not C6, my apologies. Which of the following conditions is present for all sellers in a perfectly competitive market? All sellers have an equal and high level of market power. Not necessarily. They can have, in a perfectly competitive market, you all have low market power. So that's the first red flag. And another thing is that you can have slightly different amounts of market power, but the general gist is that all of you have low market power. So A is incorrect. B, the product's prices vary across the sellers. Just like I told you before, in a perfectly competitive market, the price is the same. Each of the sellers sell at the market price and they don't sell at their own unique price. So B is incorrect. C, the number of sellers is small. That is also not correct because in a perfectly competitive market, like I said, there are many sellers. That's one of the reasons why there is very low market power. D, all sellers are selling an identical product. This is actually correct. And that's because in a perfectly competitive market, the good being sold is a very standardized good, which basically means that it's not very different. It's just the same item, basically. An example would be wheat. You can get wheat from Michigan or wheat from Kansas. It's still wheat. You can still do whatever you'd like with it. So it's not very different or special. Is there any questions about that? Okay, 7. And this is where I want to explain too as well. So how we obtain, how we understand what our quantity and our prices is by looking at where marginal cost meets marginal revenue, and then looking at where that point is on the demand curve. So in this case, marginal cost meets marginal revenue right here. Then we go all the way up and we see that this is where it is on the demand curve. And the reason why it's less is because, well, the price is set right here, while the marginal cost and the marginal revenue met all the way down here. So that's why it's less. And so how do we translate this into the answer? So if marginal cost and marginal revenue met right here, that means the quantity is 4, because 4 is where this quantity is at. And if we go all the way up and we wait to see where the demand curve is, we can match it all the way to the left right here. And we know that this is the price. So our answer would be $4 quantity and $7. Is there any questions about how I got that? Okay. Is there any questions about market structure or market power? Okay, we'll move on to game theory, then we can wrap this up. Okay. A coordination game exists when, well, I guess I should describe what a coordination game is. A coordination game is a game where both players have a vested interest in doing the same action as the other player. So what this means is that in a coordination game, it's a game where both people have an interest in doing the exact same thing. An example would be, let's say we're investing in real estate. And so the best outcomes for us are if we invest, we both invest, let's say $1 million, or we both invest only $500,000. So it's just a game where both players do the exact same thing. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And so with that in mind, let's look at all of these answers. A product or issue of the game concerns communication such as phones or media. This is the throwaway answer. If you looked at the professor's lecture, the coordination game example he gave was based off like investment or whatever. Obviously that has nothing to do with phones or media. And A is basically just a throwaway answer. B, coordination is costless and easy, regardless of whether it is harmful. Coordination is never going to be costless because oftentimes it is not the Nash equilibrium, which basically means that there is a better option for the player. However, if they take that option, something else, the other player might do something and it might ruin that option. So coordination is never costless. Heck, you can even look at this table down here and notice how the answer is 5,000, 5,000, but each party could easily do something else to make more money. So it's never costless. You give up some money in exchange. C, all players have a common interest in coordinating their choices. That is actually the right answer because that's exactly what a coordination game is. It's a game where players have a common interest in coordinating their choices. That's basically it. And D, collusion created the market or situation from the start. I don't really know what this means. I believe it's like saying coordination created the game, so it becomes a coordination game. That also doesn't make any sense. There's plenty of ways that a coordination game can form even without prior coordination. So that's that. 2, use a table with Bella and Martin to answer the question. If Bella and Martin successfully cooperate, then Bella's profits will be blank and Martin's profit will be blank. So let's make a table. And I'm just going to use the first 2 numbers in each of the numbers so it doesn't become like a giant mess. Okay. And 50 and 50. Okay, so what you need to understand about a coordination game is that both players need to do the exact same thing. And it doesn't have to mean identical things. Like in this case, it'd either be both raising their prices, even though they raise their prices at different rates, or both lowering their prices, even though they both don't lower their prices at the same rate. That's why, let's say Martin raises his price to 50, but Bella raises it to 55. So the general gist is either lowering or raising prices. So with that in mind, remember, if both parties do the exact same action, it can only be this square or this square. Because think about it. If they do this square, that means Martin raised his price while Bella lowered hers. And then in this square, Martin lowered his while Bella's raised hers. So basically, if you remember what a coordination game is, just remember it can only ever be the upper left or the bottom right square, because those are the only 2 times where both players do the exact same thing. So in this case, let's lower down our options. They could either both lower their prices for 4,000 or 3,500, or they can both raise their prices and both get 5,000. Obviously, they both want to get 5,000 because that's more money. So the answer for 2 is C. Is there any questions about that?
How did you know to assume that it was like a coordination game? Was it just based off of the chapter or?
Cooperate. That's the key word.
Okay.
I'd write that down in your note sheet. That's a very good thing. That was a very good question.
Thank you.
If it says cooperate or something like that, no, it's a coordination game. 3. When an individual's best choice may depend on what other people choose, and others people's best choices may depend on what the individual chooses, then blank is the science that is useful to help the decision makers analyze their options. I'll just tell you guys outright, the answer is game theory. I don't really know what the other 3 answers are. I believe they come from the chapters, but not the chapters, the readings, but I don't do the readings. So I don't believe they're going to be relevant, seeing how he didn't even talk about any of them. So 3 is B. Is there any questions about that? Okay. And this one's actually going to be more like the heart of how to figure out what the best option is on a matrix. I'm just plugging in numbers right now. Okay. Now with this, let's look at our table here. The best way to start this is to figure out if each player has an absolute strategy. If one has an absolute strategy, then this becomes very easy. However, let me show you like how I like to do it. So first, let's start with Vlad since he's player one. What is Vlad's best option when Assad charges $1? Well, his best option is to also charge $1. Because let's look at this. He could either make 2,000 by charging $1, or make 300, or make 500 by charging $3. Obviously, 2,000 is more than 500, so he should charge 200. Not 200. He should charge $1 per cookie. When Assad charges $3, Vlad can either charge $1 and get 3,500, or he can charge $3 and get $3,000. Obviously, 3,500 is a lot more, so he should charge $1. Notice how, regardless of what Assad does, Vlad's best option is to charge $1. That's going to be very important when we try to find the Nash equilibrium. Let's look at Assad's choices now. When Vlad charges $1, what's Assad's best choice? He can either get 2,000 or he can get $500. Well, he should charge $1 and get 2,000 because 2,000 is more than 500. And when Vlad charges $3, Assad can either charge $1 and get 3,500, or he can get $3,000. Obviously, 3,500 is more than 3,000, so he should charge 3,000. And so, what does this indicate? This indicates that regardless of what Vlad charges, Assad will always charge $1. In the same way around, regardless of what Assad does, Vlad will charge $1. All of Vlad's best options are at the top right here, while all of Assad's best options are to the left. So what's the square that's to the top and to the left? Well, it's 2,000, 2,000. And that's also our answer. And so 4 is D. But I also want to explain what a Nash equilibrium is. A Nash equilibrium means you can't do any better. Regardless of doing another move, you will not do any better. And is that the case? Well, let's think about it. Let's say right now Vlad's charging $1 in our Nash equilibrium. Let's say he wants to charge $3. Well, he'd actually be making 500, so he loses 1,500. Let's say Assad wants to charge $3. He loses 1,500. So there's no better option for them. Sure, you could say, oh, but Kyle, in this scenario, they both get more money. That should be the answer. Not necessarily, and let me explain why. Can Assad do any better? Let's say he charges $1 now. Yeah, he can do better. He does 3,500. He does $500 better. Not Assad, Vlad. Can Assad do any better? Yeah, Assad can. He can charge $1 instead of $3, and he gets an additional $500. So the reason why 3,000, 3,000 is not the right answer is because both parties could do better if they just decided to do the other move. And I forgot to explain that to one of the people I was explaining this to a couple of days ago. But that's why 2,000, 2,000 is the Nash equilibrium. It's because there's no better move for either party. So that brings an end to game theory. Is there any questions about that? I know that's pretty confusing. Okay. And well, that also brings our study session to an end. Is there any questions about anything?
I don't have a question, but thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It
Yep,
helped a lot.
no problem. Of course.
Have a good night.
Yep, you too.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you again. Have a good one.
Yep, you too.